Stay away from the wedding, my mom texted. You and your kids just make things awkward. No warning, no phone call, just those brutal words lighting up my screen while I stood in the checkout line at Riverside Pharmacy in downtown Millbrook, clutching a $180 prescription for my daughter's asthma medication. My sister Camille responded with 3 laughing emojis. I stared at those yellow faces mocking me for a long moment, then typed back, "Then you won't need my signature on the Thornfield Manor contract." Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. They kept laughing in the family group chat, completely unaware that I was already holding the one document they couldn't afford to lose. The venue contract that had my name as the primary signatory. The same contract that secured their dream lakeside wedding at the most exclusive location in Clearwater County. And that's where everything began to unravel in the most spectacular way possible. Before I tell you exactly how this played out, hit that like button and tell me in the comments, have you ever had family exclude you from something you were secretly paying for? Because what happened next will show you why sometimes the quiet ones hold all the real power. Standing there in that pharmacy, prescription bottle trembling in my hands, I wasn't just processing the cruelty of those words. I was processing 3 years of being treated like the family's personal ATM while being made to feel grateful for the privilege. 3 years of my mother, Patricia Blackthorne, treating my financial stability like her personal emergency fund while simultaneously acting ashamed of how I earned that stability. You see, I'm Roxanne Ashford, and I'm what you might call the family disappointment who accidentally became the family bank. At 34, I'm a single mother of 2 beautiful kids, Emma, who's 8, and little Jake, who's 6. I work as a data analyst for Meridian Tech Solutions here in Millbrook, making a decent 6-figure salary that allows me to live comfortably in our cozy townhouse on Maple Grove Street. Nothing flashy, nothing that screams wealth, but stable. Reliable. Everything my family claimed to value until they needed to explain me to their friends. The text message that changed everything came on a Tuesday afternoon in October. I was picking up Emma's inhaler refill, the same routine I'd done dozens of times before, when my phone buzzed with what would become the most expensive text message my family ever sent. But here's what they didn't know, what they couldn't have possibly imagined. I wasn't just attending Camille's wedding. I was literally the only reason it was happening at all. For 8 months, I'd been the invisible hand behind every detail of what was supposed to be Clearwater County's wedding of the year. While Camille flitted around town telling everyone about her engagement to Dylan Rosewood, heir to the Rosewood construction fortune, I was the one making sure her fairy tale actually had a venue to happen in. Thornfield Manor wasn't just any wedding venue. It was the venue. A restored 1920s estate overlooking Crystal Lake, with manicured gardens that looked like something out of a magazine and a ballroom that had hosted politicians and celebrities. The kind of place that books up 2 years in advance and costs more than most people's annual salary. The kind of place that required a $15,000 deposit and a credit score that could open doors to places most people only dream of seeing. And guess whose name was on every single piece of paperwork? Not Camille's. Not my mother's. Not even Dylan's, despite his family's money. Mine. Roxanne Ashford, the family disappointment who happened to have the kind of steady income and pristine credit that made venue coordinators smile and nod approvingly. It had started innocently enough, the way these things always do. Camille had fallen in love with Thornfield Manor during a venue tour in February, but there was a problem. Despite Dylan's family wealth, most of it was tied up in business investments and property. They were wealthy on paper but cash poor in practice. Camille was working part-time at a boutique in downtown Millbrook, barely making enough to cover her share of rent in the apartment she shared with 2 roommates. Roxy, my mother had pleaded during one of our monthly coffee meetings at Bella Vista Cafe, you know how important this is to Camille. It's her dream wedding. The Rosewoods are expecting something spectacular, and we can't let them think we're not suitable. That word. Suitable. It hung in the air between us like a challenge, loaded with all the class anxiety that had defined our family since I could remember. My mother had spent her entire life feeling like she was one wrong move away from being exposed as not belonging in the circles she desperately wanted to join. "I'll pay you back as soon as Dylan's trust fund kicks in next year," she promised, her manicured fingers wrapped around her latte cup. "It's just temporary. You know I'm good for it." I should have said no. I should have seen the warning signs flashing like neon signs in the darkness. But I didn't, because despite everything, I loved my sister. I loved my mother. And I wanted to believe that this time, this one time, helping them would mean I was finally good enough to be part of their world. So I signed the contract. I put down the deposit. I became the primary contact for every vendor, every coordinator, every detail of what was supposed to be Camille's perfect day. I told myself it was temporary, that it was just about helping family, that the money would come back to me eventually. I just never imagined that when it came time for the actual wedding, I'd be the one they'd try to erase from the guest list. But standing there in that pharmacy, staring at their laughing emojis, I realized something that changed everything. They thought they were cutting me out of their celebration. What they didn't realize was that they were about to learn a very expensive lesson about the difference between having money and having power. And I was about to teach them that lesson in the most unforgettable way possible. When people hear stories like mine, they always ask the same question: how could your own family treat you like that? But that's not the right question. The right question is, what do you do when you finally realize that your family has never seen you as family at all? That's a story worth telling. And trust me, you're going to want to hear how this ends. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The truth is, it didn't happen overnight. My mother, Patricia Blackthorne, had turned emotional manipulation into an art form, and I had been her most devoted student and biggest victim for over 2 decades. Ever since I graduated college at 22, she'd perfected the delicate balance of making me feel both indispensable and inadequate at the same time. Patricia had married my stepfather, Gordon Whitfield, when I was 15, and suddenly our modest life in the suburbs of Millbrook transformed into something that looked successful from the outside but was built on a foundation of credit cards and keeping up appearances. Gordon owned a small accounting firm, Whitfield and Associates, that did well enough to afford the house on Elmwood Drive in the better part of town, but not well enough to support Patricia's champagne tastes on a beer budget. That's where I came in. From the moment I landed my first real job after college at Meridian Tech Solutions, I became what Patricia liked to call the family's safety net. But safety nets, I learned, have a way of becoming trampolines for other people's dreams while you stay stretched out underneath, holding everything together. When Camille was 19 and decided she wanted to study fashion merchandising at Westbrook College, a private school that cost $45,000 a year, guess who co-signed the student loans? When Gordon's business hit a rough patch during the 2020 recession and they were 3 months behind on their mortgage, who do you think got the tearful phone call about how they might lose the house that meant so much to Patricia's social standing? "Roxy, sweetheart," Patricia would say, her voice taking on that particular tone that I now recognize as her signature manipulation melody. "You're so good with money, and you don't have the same pressures we do. You don't understand what it's like to have to maintain certain standards." Standards. That was Patricia's favorite word. It was her catch-all excuse for why she needed a new car every 3 years, why she couldn't shop at Target like I did, why Camille's apartment had to be in the trendy Riverside district instead of somewhere more affordable. Standards meant that their needs would always be more important than my financial security. But here's the thing about being the reliable one in a family full of dreamers and schemers: you start to believe that your worth is measured in your usefulness. Every time I helped them out of a financial hole, Patricia would shower me with praise about how responsible I was, how proud she was of the woman I'd become. It felt like love, even though looking back, I can see it was just positive reinforcement for being their personal bank. Camille, my half-sister, was Patricia's golden child in every way I could never be. Where I was practical and steady, Camille was vibrant and spontaneous. Where I preferred quiet evenings at home with Emma and Jake, Camille was always at some event, some party, some gathering where she sparkled like the social butterfly Patricia had always wanted me to be. At 26, Camille had Patricia's delicate features and Gordon's easy charm. She could walk into any room and immediately become the center of attention, a skill I'd never possessed and secretly envied. She worked part-time at Luxe Boutique on Main Street, spending most of her salary on maintaining her wardrobe and social life. but somehow never worried about money because she knew someone would always catch her when she fell. That someone was usually me. When Camille's car broke down, I covered the repairs. When she wanted to take a girls' trip to Miami for her friend's bachelorette party, I helped with the expenses. When she got behind on her credit card payments, I quietly transferred money to her account with the understanding that she'd pay me back when things got better. Things never got better. They just got more expensive. I'm not entirely sure when I realized that I wasn't just helping family, I was enabling a lifestyle that none of them could actually afford. Maybe it was when I calculated that I'd spent over $60,000 helping them over the past 5 years. Maybe it was when I noticed that every family gathering involved some new request for financial assistance. Or maybe it was when I overheard Patricia on the phone with her friend Diane, laughing about how reliable little Roxy always came through when they needed her. Reliable little Roxy. That's how they saw me. Not as a daughter, not as a sister, but as a solution to their financial problems wrapped up in family obligations. I'm 34 years old, and I live in a modest 3-bedroom townhouse on Maple Grove Street with my 2 kids. Emma, my 8-year-old, is brilliant and curious, always asking questions about everything from why the sky is blue to how computers work. Jake, my 6-year-old, is my little artist, constantly drawing pictures and building elaborate structures with his blocks. They're the best part of my life, the reason I get up every morning and the reason I work so hard to provide stability for us. My days blend together in the kind of routine that comes with single parenthood and a demanding career. I'm up at 6 a.m., getting the kids ready for school, packing lunches, making sure Emma has her inhaler and Jake has his favorite stuffed animal for comfort. I drop them off at Millbrook Elementary, grab a coffee from the drive-thru at Corner Cafe, and spend my days analyzing data patterns for tech companies who pay well for insights they could probably figure out themselves if they took the time. After work, it's school pickup, homework supervision, dinner preparation, bath time, and bedtime stories. On weekends, we go to the park, visit the library, or have movie nights on our second-hand couch. It's not glamorous, but it's ours, and it's peaceful. Or at least it was, until Camille got engaged. Dylan Rosewood was everything Patricia had ever dreamed of in a son-in-law. His family owned Rosewood Construction, one of the largest development companies in Clearwater County. They'd built half the upscale neighborhoods around Millbrook, including the gated community where Patricia fantasized about living someday. Dylan was handsome, charming, and came with the kind of social connections that made Patricia's eyes light up with possibility. When Camille announced their engagement at Sunday dinner in March, Patricia nearly cried with joy. Not because her daughter had found love, but because she'd found access to a world that had always been just out of reach. This is going to be the wedding of the century, Patricia declared, already mentally planning how she'd leverage this connection for her own social advancement. The Rosewoods know everyone in this county. This could change everything for our family. I should have recognized the warning signs in those words. This could change everything for our family. Not for Camille. For our family. Patricia was already calculating how to maximize the social capital of her daughter's marriage. But I didn't see it then. I was too busy feeling grateful that for once, I might be part of something beautiful in our family instead of just the person who paid for it. I offered to help with the wedding planning, thinking maybe this time would be different. Maybe this time, my contributions would be appreciated instead of expected. I had no idea that I was about to fund the most expensive lesson of my life about the difference between being needed and being valued. And I definitely had no idea that the wedding I was helping to plan would become the stage for my own liberation. But every family has its breaking point. And mine was waiting for me in a group text message that would change everything. Dylan and Camille's engagement party in April was when I should have realized what I was really signing up for. The event was held at the Rosewood family estate, a sprawling property on the outskirts of Millbrook that screamed old money from every perfectly manicured hedge. I watched Patricia float through the crowd like she'd been born to it, introducing herself to Dylan's relatives and family friends with the practiced ease of someone who'd rehearsed this moment her entire life. "This is my daughter Roxanne," she'd say when forced to acknowledge me, her voice carrying just enough dismissal to let people know I wasn't the important daughter. "She works in computers." The way she said it made my six-figure salary sound like I fixed broken laptops at a strip mall repair shop. But when Dylan's mother, Evelyn Rosewood, mentioned that they'd been looking everywhere for the perfect venue and everything was either booked or unsuitable, Patricia's entire demeanor shifted. "Oh, don't worry about that," she said with the confidence of someone who had already solved the problem. "Roxanne has excellent connections. She'll find something perfect." That's when I learned that in Patricia's mind, I wasn't just attending this wedding, I was producing it. The next morning, Patricia called me before I'd even finished my first cup of coffee. "Roxy, darling, I need you to look into Thornfield Manor for Camille's wedding. I know it's expensive, but this is important. The Rosewoods are expecting something spectacular." Thornfield Manor. Even I knew that name, and I wasn't exactly plugged into Millbrook's social scene. It was the kind of place that appeared in wedding magazines and hosted events for politicians and celebrities. The kind of place that had a waiting list longer than most people's mortgages. "Mom, places like that book years in advance," I said, watching Emma and Jake eat their cereal while trying to process what she was asking. "And they're incredibly expensive." "Just call them," Patricia insisted. "Tell them it's for the Rosewood wedding. That name opens doors around here." I should have said no right then. I should have told her that if the Rosewood name opens so many doors, they could open this one themselves. But I didn't, because part of me was curious about whether I could actually pull this off. Part of me wanted to prove that quiet, reliable Roxy could work miracles when her family needed her. So I called Thornfield Manor that afternoon during my lunch break. I spoke with their events coordinator, a woman named Lauren Hartwell who had the kind of crisp, professional voice that comes from years of dealing with wealthy clients and their impossible demands. "I'm calling about availability for a wedding next October," I said, expecting to be politely turned away. "October of this year?" Lauren asked. "I'm afraid we're completely booked through next year. We might have some availability in 2025, but I'd need to check our extended calendar." This is where I should have hung up and reported back to Patricia that it was impossible. Instead, I found myself saying, this would be for the Rosewood Blackthorn wedding. Dylan Rosewood and Camille Blackthorn. There was a pause on the line. "Rosewood Construction?" Lauren's voice shifted slightly, taking on the tone of someone who recognized the name and what it meant in terms of local influence and potential future business. "Yes," I said, feeling like a fraud but pressing forward anyway. "Let me check something," she said. I could hear her typing in the background. "We did have a cancellation for October 15th. It's our premium package, the full estate rental with exclusive use of the gardens and lakefront. It's substantial." "How substantial?" I asked, though I already had a sinking feeling about the answer. "The venue rental alone is $25,000, and that doesn't include catering, florals, or any of the additional services. Most couples who book Thornfield spend between $80,000 and $120,000 for their complete wedding package." My mouth went dry. I made good money, but that was more than my annual salary after taxes. "I'll need to discuss this with the family and get back to you." "Of course," Lauren said. "But I should mention that we'll need a deposit to hold the date. Our premium package requires $15,000 down, with the balance due 30 days before the event." $15,000. Just to hold the date. I thanked Lauren and hung up, staring at my phone like it had just delivered news of my own execution. That evening, I called Patricia to explain what I'd learned. I expected her to be shocked by the cost, to immediately start looking for alternatives. Instead, she sounded thrilled. "See? I knew the Rosewood name would work," she said. "This is perfect. Camille is going to be over the moon." "Mom," I said carefully, "did you hear the part about the cost? This isn't just expensive, it's astronomical." "Oh, honey, don't worry about that," Patricia said with the breezy confidence of someone who had never worried about money because someone else always handled it. "Dylan's family will cover most of it, and we'll figure out the rest. The important thing is securing the date. You should call them back tomorrow and put down the deposit." "The deposit is $15,000, I said slowly, hoping the number would sink in. I know it sounds like a lot, but think about what this means for Camille. For all of us. The Rosewoods will see that we're the kind of family who can handle this level of sophistication. This could open so many doors for everyone. That phrase again. This could open doors for everyone. But as I sat there listening to Patricia's excitement, I realized she wasn't talking about doors opening for me. She was talking about doors opening for her and Camille, doors that my money would pry open for them to walk through. I'll need to think about it, I said. What's to think about? Patricia's voice sharpened slightly. Roxy, this is important. This is Camille's future we're talking about. You know how much this means to her. I did know. I'd seen Camille's face light up when she talked about her dream wedding. I'd listened to her describe the perfect venue, the perfect dress, the perfect day that would make all her friends jealous and establish her as Mrs. Dylan Rosewood in the kind of style that mattered in Millbrook's social circles. The next day, I called Lauren back and put the deposit on my credit card. $15,000 charged to my account in less time than it takes to order coffee. Just like that, I was committed to making Camille's dream wedding happen, whether I could afford it or not. But the deposit was just the beginning. Over the next 6 months, I found myself deeper and deeper in the wedding planning process, not as a sister helping out, but as the primary financial backer of an increasingly elaborate production. When Camille fell in love with a florist whose arrangements cost $8,000, guess who got the call about covering the difference between what Dylan's family was willing to pay and what Camille wanted? When she decided the standard catering package wasn't elegant enough and insisted on upgrading to the premium menu that added another $12,000 to the bill, who do you think was asked to help bridge the gap? Every conversation with Patricia started the same way. I know this is a lot to ask, but... followed by some explanation of why this particular expense was crucial to the success of the wedding and, by extension, the future happiness of everyone involved. I kept telling myself it was temporary. Dylan's trust fund would kick in after the wedding, Patricia assured me. The Rosewoods would reimburse us for everything once their accountant sorted out some complicated tax situation. Camille would pay me back once she and Dylan got settled and she could find a better job. There was always a reason why the money would come back to me eventually, and there was always a reason why I needed to pay for things right now. By September, I had spent over $47,000 on my sister's wedding. $47,000 that had come out of my savings, off my credit cards, and out of the college funds I'd been slowly building for Emma and Jake. I was financially committed to this wedding in a way that went far beyond sisterly support. I was literally invested in its success. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was funding a celebration I was increasingly feeling disconnected from. Every planning meeting happened when I was at work. Every dress fitting and cake tasting was scheduled around Patricia and Camille's availability, not mine. Every decision was made by people who weren't paying for it and then presented to me as a fait accompli. I was the producer of a show I wasn't allowed to direct, the financier of a dream I wasn't invited to shape. But I told myself it would all be worth it when I saw Camille walk down the aisle at the venue I'd secured, surrounded by the flowers I'd paid for, celebrating with the food I'd funded. I told myself that when October 15th came, I'd finally be part of something beautiful instead of just the person who made beautiful things possible for other people. I had no idea that by the time October 15th arrived, I wouldn't even be invited to witness what I'd created. Looking back, there were signs I should have caught, subtle shifts in tone and behavior that should have warned me what was coming. But when you're so deep in the role of family problem solver, it's easy to miss the moments when the people you're helping start to see you as the problem itself. The first red flag came in late August during what Patricia called a family strategy meeting at her house on Elmwood Drive. I'd arranged for Emma and Jake to spend the afternoon with my neighbor Mrs. Chin so I could focus on wedding details without distraction. I walked into Patricia's pristine living room expecting to discuss final vendor confirmations and timeline logistics. Instead, I found myself in what felt like an intervention. Camille was perched on the edge of the white leather sofa, her manicured fingers twisted together in a way that suggested anxiety. Patricia sat across from her in the matching armchair, her posture rigid with the kind of tension that usually preceded difficult conversations. Gordon was notably absent, probably hiding in his home office to avoid whatever drama was brewing. "Roxy, sweetie, sit down," Patricia said, gesturing to the remaining chair. We need to talk about some concerns that have come up. Concerns. I felt my stomach drop even as I maintained a calm expression. What kind of concerns? Camille looked at Patricia, who nodded encouragingly. It's about the wedding, Camille began, her voice smaller than usual. Some of Dylan's family members have been asking questions about the financial arrangements. I blinked, trying to process what she was saying. What kind of questions? Patricia leaned forward, her voice taking on that careful tone she used when delivering bad news. Apparently, Evelyn Rosewood mentioned to someone that she was surprised by how much control you have over the vendor contracts. She was under the impression that Dylan's family was handling more of the coordination. The word coordination hung in the air like a euphemism for something much more significant. I looked between them, waiting for someone to explain what this meant in practical terms. The thing is, Camille continued, Dylan's been getting pressure from his parents about appearing too dependent. They're worried about how it looks that his fiancé's family is so involved in funding what's supposed to be his wedding gift to me. Funding. There it was, the word they'd been dancing around for months finally spoken aloud. Not helping, not contributing, not supporting. Funding. Like I was some kind of silent investor rather than the sister of the bride. I don't understand, I said slowly. Are you saying they don't want me involved in the planning anymore? Patricia and Camille exchanged another look, and I realized this conversation had been rehearsed. They discussed my role in my absence and come to conclusions about what needed to change. Not exactly, Patricia said. It's more about visibility. The Rosewoods are very conscious of appearances, and they want the wedding to reflect well on both families. They're worried that if too many people know how much you've contributed, it might create the wrong impression. The wrong impression. I sat there absorbing the implications of what she was saying. My financial contributions, which had made this entire wedding possible, were now somehow embarrassing. My involvement, which had secured the venue and vendors that everyone was so excited about, was now a liability to be managed. So what exactly are you asking me to do? I said, my voice carefully controlled. Camille shifted uncomfortably. Maybe just step back a little. Let Dylan and me handle more of the final details. We don't want anyone to think that we can't manage our own wedding. Step back. From the wedding I was paying for. From the event that existed only because of my credit score and bank account. I looked around Patricia's living room, taking in the expensive furniture and artwork that I knew Gordon's small accounting firm couldn't afford on its own, and wondered if they could hear the irony in what they were asking. And what about the contracts that are in my name? I asked. The final payments that are due from my accounts? Oh, we're not asking you to stop helping, Patricia said quickly. We just think it might be better if you're more discreet about it. Maybe don't mention the financial details to other people. Let them assume Dylan's family is handling more than they actually are. Discreet. I was being asked to become a silent partner in my own sister's wedding, to fund her dream while pretending I had nothing to do with making it happen. The role of family ATM was apparently fine, as long as I didn't expect any acknowledgement for playing it. The second warning sign came 3 weeks later, during what should have been a routine vendor meeting. I'd taken a half-day off work to meet with the florist, Lauren from Thornfield Manor, and the photographer to coordinate final details. We were supposed to finalize the timeline for setup and confirm the payment schedule for the remaining balances. I arrived at Thornfield Manor to find Camille already there, along with Dylan and his mother Evelyn. They were standing in the main ballroom, gesturing at the space and talking in the animated way people do when they're making important decisions. Roxanne. Lauren called out when she saw me. Perfect timing. We were just going over the final layout for the reception. I joined the group, expecting to be brought up to speed on whatever they'd been discussing. Instead, I found myself standing on the periphery while they continued their conversation as if I'd never arrived. I think the head table should face the windows, Evelyn was saying, so the bride and groom can see the lake during dinner. It'll make for better photos. That's exactly what I was thinking, Camille agreed. Dylan, what do you think about moving the band to the other side? I waited for someone to ask my opinion, since I was technically the client Lauren was supposed to be coordinating with. When that didn't happen, I cleared my throat gently. Lauren, did you need me to sign off on these changes? Everyone turned to look at me, and I caught something in Evelyn's expression that I couldn't quite identify. Surprise, maybe, or confusion about why I thought I had a say in the matter. Actually, Dylan said, we were thinking it might be simpler if I handle the vendor communications going forward. Since I'll be the one they're working with on the day of the wedding anyway. Lauren looked between us, clearly sensing tension but unsure how to navigate it. I'll need to verify any changes with whoever's listed as the primary contact on our contracts. That's Roxanne, Camille said quickly, then added, but we can change that if it's easier. Change that. Transfer the vendor relationships from me to Dylan, despite the fact that my name was on every contract and my credit cards were funding every payment. I stood there feeling like I was watching my own erasure happen in real time. I think we should probably discuss this privately first, I said, looking directly at Camille. But Evelyn stepped forward with the kind of smile that wealthy people use when they're about to solve a problem with money. You know what? Why don't Dylan and I handle the rest of this meeting? I'm sure you have more important things to do, Roxanne. More important things to do than coordinating the wedding I was paying for. I looked at Camille, waiting for her to object, to remind everyone that I'd been handling these details for months and knew more about the vendors and timeline than anyone else in the room. Instead, she nodded gratefully. That would be amazing, Evelyn. You're so good at this kind of thing. I drove home that afternoon feeling like I'd just been fired from a job I'd never applied for but had been doing faithfully for months. The wedding was still happening, the bills were still coming to me, but somehow I was no longer necessary for the actual planning process. The third and most obvious warning sign came 2 weeks before the wedding, during what Patricia announced would be the final family dinner before the big day. I should have realized something was wrong when she insisted on having it at Romano's, the upscale Italian restaurant downtown where a family dinner for 6 would cost more than I usually spend on groceries in a month. This is a celebration, Patricia announced as we settled into our booth, of how beautifully everything's come together. I looked around the table at Patricia, Gordon, Camille, Dylan, and Evelyn, realizing I was the only person there who actually knew how much everything had cost and where the money had come from. But when Patricia raised her wine glass to toast the upcoming union of 2 wonderful families, I noticed she was looking at everyone except me. To Camille and Dylan, she continued, and to the Rosewoods for welcoming our family with such warmth and generosity. Warmth and generosity. I took a sip of wine and wondered if anyone else found it ironic that Patricia was toasting the Rosewoods' generosity at a dinner I was paying for, in celebration of a wedding I was funding. That's when Evelyn cleared her throat and said, I hope you'll understand that we've had to make some adjustments to the guest list. When you're dealing with a venue like Thornfield Manor, you have to be very conscious of the overall atmosphere you're creating. The overall atmosphere. I had a feeling I wasn't going to like where this conversation was heading. Of course, Patricia said quickly. We completely understand. Weddings at this level require careful curation. Careful curation. I set down my wine glass and waited for someone to explain what they were actually talking about. That's when I learned that Emma and Jake had been uninvited from the wedding. The children, Evelyn said delicately, cutting into her oh-so-buco as if she were discussing the weather, might be more comfortable staying home. Thornfield Manor events tend to be quite formal. Very adult-oriented. I felt the words hit me like cold water. You're uninviting my children from the wedding? Not uninviting, Camille said quickly, her voice tight with embarrassment. It's just that we've decided to make it an adults-only celebration. You understand. I looked around the table, waiting for someone to acknowledge how ridiculous this was. Emma and Jake had been part of every conversation about the wedding for months. Emma was supposed to be a junior bridesmaid, and Jake had been excited about wearing his first real suit. They'd been talking about the wedding for weeks, Emma practicing walking slowly down an imaginary aisle, Jake asking questions about whether there would be dancing he could participate in. Since when is it adults only? I asked, my voice carefully controlled despite the anger building in my chest. This is the first I'm hearing about this. Dylan shifted uncomfortably in his seat. My cousin's kids can be a lot. We thought it would be easier to just make it a blanket policy. A blanket policy that apparently applied to everyone except the people who mattered to them. I noticed that Dylan didn't mention whether his cousins themselves had been uninvited along with their children, or if the adults-only policy somehow only affected certain families. Emma and Jake have been looking forward to this for months, I said. Emma's been practicing her walking for the ceremony. Patricia's face flushed slightly. Oh, honey, Emma was never actually going to be in the ceremony. We were just letting her pretend. You know how little girls get about weddings. Just pretending. My 8-year-old daughter had spent weeks excitedly talking about her role in Aunt Camille's wedding, and apparently everyone knew it was fake except her. And me. I see, I said, taking another sip of wine to buy myself time to process what was happening. And when exactly were you planning to tell Emma and Jake that they couldn't come? We thought you could explain it to them, Camille said. Tell them it's a grown-up party or something. Kids understand that kind of thing. Kids understand that kind of thing. I stared at my sister, this person I'd been financially supporting for years, as she casually suggested I break my children's hearts to accommodate her vision of sophistication. Besides, Evelyn added, wouldn't it be nice to have an evening to yourself? You work so hard, Roxanne. This could be like a little vacation from parenting. A vacation from parenting. At the wedding I was paying for. Where I would apparently be attending alone, watching my money create beautiful memories for everyone except my own children. I'll need to think about this, I said. The temperature at the table dropped noticeably. Patricia's smile became strained, and Camille exchanged a look with Dylan that I wasn't supposed to notice. What's to think about? Patricia asked, her voice taking on that edge it got when she felt her plans being questioned. It's just one evening, Roxanne. Surely you can arrange childcare for one evening. Arrange childcare. So I could attend the wedding I was funding while my children stayed home, excluded from the celebration they'd been excitedly anticipating. I was supposed to pay for the privilege of being separated from my family so that other people could enjoy theirs. That's when something clicked into place in my mind, a realization that had been building for weeks but that I'd been too invested in the fantasy to acknowledge. This wasn't about Dylan's cousin's children being disruptive. This wasn't about maintaining an elegant atmosphere. This was about my children specifically being seen as a problem. Can I ask whose idea this was? I said quietly. The silence that followed was answer enough. I looked around the table again, taking in the carefully neutral expressions, the way everyone was suddenly very interested in their food. I think, Evelyn said carefully, we all just want what's best for the wedding. This is such an important day for Camille and Dylan, and we want everything to be perfect. Perfect. Without my children. Perfect, with me there alone, funding a celebration that my own family wasn't good enough to fully participate in. I excused myself to go to the restroom, needing a moment to collect myself before I said something I couldn't take back. In the mirror above the sink, I looked at my own face and tried to recognize the person staring back at me. When had I become someone who would sit at a dinner table and politely listen to people explain why my children weren't welcome at an event I was paying for? When I returned to the table, the conversation had moved on to other topics. Final menu selections, photography timelines, transportation arrangements for out-of-town guests. I sat quietly, listening to them plan details for a celebration that was becoming more and more clear wasn't really meant to include me in any meaningful way. The drive home that night was when everything truly crystallized. I sat in traffic on Millbrook Avenue, my hands gripping the steering wheel, thinking about how I was going to explain to Emma that she wouldn't be walking down any aisle after all. How I was going to tell Jake that the suit we'd bought him would stay in his closet, because he wasn't sophisticated enough for the party his aunt was throwing with his college fund money. That's when I got the text message that changed everything. I was stopped at a red light when my phone buzzed. The family group chat, which had been relatively quiet during dinner, suddenly came alive with activity. I picked up my phone, expecting maybe some follow-up about the evening's conversation or perhaps someone thanking me for dinner. Instead, I found myself staring at a screenshot Camille had posted. It was from her Instagram story, a photo of her and Dylan at the restaurant, glasses raised in a toast. The caption read, "Final family dinner before the big day. So grateful for everyone who's made this dream possible." Red heart hashtag almost mers hashtag dream wedding hashtag blessed. Underneath the screenshot, Camille had written in the group chat, "Oops. Forgot to include everyone in the photo. Next time." Face blowing a kiss. Patricia had responded with crying laughing emojis. "You look so beautiful, sweetheart. Can't wait for Saturday." Then Dylan chimed in, "Thanks for an amazing dinner, Mrs. Blackthorne. Can't wait to officially join the family." I scrolled up to see if there were any earlier messages I'd missed, any acknowledgement of who had actually paid for that amazing dinner they were all so grateful for. There wasn't. But what really broke something inside me was Patricia's next message. "I'm just so proud of how this has all come together. The Rosewoods are going to be so impressed with how we've handled everything. This is exactly the kind of wedding our family deserves." Smiling face with hearts. Our family deserves. The family that had just spent dinner explaining why my children weren't good enough to attend the wedding I was funding. The family that was so proud of how we had handled everything, while sitting at a table where I was the only person who actually knew what handling everything had cost. The light turned green, and I drove the rest of the way home in a silence that felt different from any quiet I'd experienced before. It wasn't peaceful or contemplative. It was the silence of finally seeing clearly, of understanding exactly where I stood in my family's hierarchy of importance. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the car for a long moment, looking at my modest townhouse with its small front yard and the bicycles Emma and Jake had left on the porch. This was my real life. These were my real priorities. Not the elaborate fantasy I'd been funding for people who saw me as an embarrassment to be managed rather than a sister to be cherished. Inside, Mrs. Chen was reading on my couch while Emma and Jake slept peacefully in their rooms. I paid her for watching them and walked her to the door, then stood in my living room looking around at the life I'd built for my children and myself. It wasn't sophisticated or impressive, but it was honest. It was ours. That's when I realized that I wasn't just upset about Emma and Jake being uninvited from the wedding. I was angry about spending months pretending that funding other people's dreams was the same thing as being valued by them. I was furious about being asked to make myself smaller and quieter so that other people could feel bigger and more important. But most of all, I was done. Done pretending that love looked like financial exploitation. Done accepting crumbs of appreciation for providing entire meals of support. Done being the family's secret weapon while being treated like their public embarrassment. I walked upstairs and checked on Emma and Jake, both sleeping soundly in their beds, and made a decision that would change everything. Tomorrow, I was going to start protecting my children from people who saw them as inconvenient. Starting with their own family. I just didn't realize yet how much power I actually had to do exactly that. The next morning was Saturday, and I woke up with a clarity that felt almost foreign after months of emotional confusion. Emma and Jake were still asleep, and the house was quiet in that peaceful way weekend mornings can be when you don't have anywhere urgent to be. I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table, looking out at the small garden where Jake had planted sunflowers earlier in the summer, and tried to process everything that had happened the night before. That's when my phone buzzed with another family group chat message. Patricia had sent a photo of herself at the farmer's market downtown, holding a bouquet of fall flowers. Getting some last-minute touches for the rehearsal dinner centerpieces. So excited for next Friday. Just one more week until our girl becomes Mrs. Rosewood. Sunflower 2 hearts. One more week. I stared at that message and felt something shift inside me, like a puzzle piece finally clicking into place. One more week until a wedding that existed only because of my financial contributions, at a venue I had secured, with vendors I had researched and booked, celebrating a couple whose deposits I had personally guaranteed. I opened my laptop and navigated to my email, scrolling through months of correspondence with Lauren Hartwell at Thornfield Manor. Every email was addressed to me. Every contract had my name as the primary contact. Every payment confirmation went to my account. Then I opened my banking app and looked at the numbers that told the real story of Camille's dream wedding. The initial $15,000 deposit to Thornfield Manor. The $8,000 for premium florals. The $12,000 catering upgrade. The $3,500 for the photographer everyone insisted was absolutely essential. The $2,800 for linens and upgraded lighting. The $4,200 for the band that would play music I'd never get to request. $47,300. That was what I had invested in a celebration I was apparently too embarrassing to attend with my children, at an event where my role was being systematically minimized despite my being the only reason it was happening at all. But as I sat there looking at those numbers, I realized something that changed everything. This wasn't just about money I had spent. This was about legal contracts I had signed. Vendor relationships I had established. A venue booking that existed in my name and my name only. I pulled out the original Thornfield Manor contract, the one I'd signed back in April when this had all seemed like a generous gesture to help my sister's dream come true. There it was, in clear black and white, primary event coordinator and financial guarantor, Roxanne Ashford. Not Camille Blackthorne. Not Dylan Rosewood. Not Patricia or Gordon or anyone from the magical Rosewood family with all their supposed influence and connections. Me. Everything came back to me. I spent the rest of the morning reviewing every contract, every vendor agreement, every deposit receipt. The photographer's contract was in my name. The florist's agreement listed me as the primary contact. The catering company had my credit card on file as the guaranteed payment method. Even the transportation service for the wedding party had been booked under my information. For months, I'd been thinking of myself as a contributor to Camille's wedding. But looking at the legal reality, I wasn't a contributor at all. I was the client. Every vendor in this elaborate production was working for me, not for the bride and groom who were making all the decisions about how my money should be spent. That afternoon, while Emma and Jake were at their friend's birthday party next door, I did something I hadn't done in months. I called Lauren Hartwell at Thornfield Manor. "Roxanne," she said warmly when she recognized my voice. Perfect timing. I was just going over the final timeline for next weekend. "Everything looks beautiful." "Lauren," I said, "I have a question about the contract terms. If I needed to make changes to the event, what would that process look like?" There was a brief pause. "What kind of changes are you thinking about?" "Hypothetically," I said, keeping my voice casual, "what if I needed to modify the guest list significantly? Or change the date?" "Well, you're the primary on the contract," Lauren said, "so you have full authority to make whatever changes you need. For guest list modifications, we just need final numbers for catering and seating arrangements. For date changes, it would depend on our availability, but given how close we are to your event, it might be challenging to find an alternative that works." "And what about cancellation?" I asked, my heart beating faster as I spoke the word aloud. Lauren's voice became more careful. "Our cancellation policy varies depending on timing. At this point, with just 1 week's notice, you'd forfeit the deposit, but we wouldn't charge the remaining balance." "Is everything okay, Roxanne?" This seems like a sudden concern. "Everything okay." I looked around my quiet house, thinking about my children sleeping safely upstairs, thinking about the college funds I depleted to pay for other people's dreams, thinking about sitting at dinner tables where I was treated like a necessary inconvenience rather than a valued family member. "I'm just trying to understand my options," I said. "Hypothetically." After we hung up, I sat with that information for a long time. Full authority to make changes. The power to modify guest lists, change dates, or cancel entirely. All because my name was on the contracts that everyone else had been treating as their property to control. That evening, Emma and Jake and I had dinner together at our small kitchen table, and I watched them chatter about their day, about school, about the Halloween costumes they were planning. They were happy, well-adjusted children who deserved to be around people who celebrated them, not people who saw them as inconveniences to be managed. "Mom," Emma said as I was clearing the dishes, "when is Aunt Camille's wedding again? I need to know so I can practice walking slowly." My heart broke a little, listening to her still planning for a role she'd never actually been given, preparing for an event she'd just been excluded from. "It's next Saturday, sweetheart." "Are you going to help me with my hair?" she asked. I want it to look really pretty. I knelt down to her level, looking into her bright, trusting eyes. "Emma, we need to talk about something. There's been a change in plans about the wedding." Her face fell immediately. Are we not going? I don't know yet, I said honestly. But I want you to know that whatever happens, it has nothing to do with you and Jake not being wonderful exactly as you are. Sometimes grown-ups make decisions that don't make sense, and this might be one of those times. She nodded solemnly, and I could see her trying to process what I was telling her. Did we do something wrong? No, baby. You and Jake never did anything wrong. Not ever. That night, after the kids were in bed, I poured myself a glass of wine and did something I hadn't done in years. I calculated exactly how much money I'd spent on my family over the past 5 years. Not just the wedding expenses, but everything. Camille's car repairs, Patricia's various emergencies, the credit card payments I'd covered, the student loan help, the mortgage assistance when Gordon's business was struggling. The number was staggering. $83,000. Over 5 years, I had quietly transferred more than $80,000 of my own money to support a family that was now explaining to me why my children weren't appropriate for their social events. I thought about Emma's college fund, which should have been growing but had been steadily depleted to cover family emergencies. I thought about Jake's future, about the opportunities one was sacrificing for him by continuously bailing out adults who never seemed to learn from their financial mistakes. And I thought about the text message that was probably coming next week, after the wedding, asking for help with honeymoon expenses or setting up the new apartment or covering some other cost that the magical Rosewood money somehow couldn't handle. That's when I made a decision that would change everything. I opened my laptop and started typing an email to Lauren Hartwell. But I didn't send it. Not yet. I saved it as a draft and closed the computer, because I wanted to be absolutely sure about what I was about to do. But for the first time in months, I felt something I'd almost forgotten I was capable of feeling: power. Real power, not just the power to write checks and solve other people's problems, but the power to make choices that protected my own interests and my children's future. They thought they could rewrite the story of this wedding to minimize my role while maximizing my financial contributions. They thought they could exclude my children while keeping my money. They thought I would quietly accept being demoted from sister and daughter to silent financial backer. What they didn't realize was that I wasn't just paying for this wedding. I was controlling it. Every vendor, every detail, every single element of their perfect day existed because of contracts I had signed and relationships I had built. And contracts, I was learning, could be modified by the person whose name was actually on them. Sunday passed quietly, with no family communication except Patricia sharing photos of wedding favors she was assembling. Monday brought a few texts about final details that I was apparently no longer expected to weigh in on. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, the week progressed with an eerie calm, as if everyone had accepted that I would simply show up on Saturday, write whatever final checks were needed, and gratefully accept my diminished role in the celebration I had made possible. Friday morning, the day before the wedding, I woke up and knew exactly what I was going to do. Friday morning dawned crisp and clear, the kind of October day that would have been perfect for an outdoor wedding ceremony. I dropped Emma and Jake off at school with their usual morning hugs, watching them run toward the building with their backpacks bouncing, completely unaware that their mother was about to make the most decisive move of her adult life. I didn't go straight to work. Instead, I drove to Corner Cafe on Main Street and ordered my usual coffee, then sat in my car in the parking lot and opened the draft email I'd written to Lauren Hartwell. I read it 3 times, checking every word, making sure I understood exactly what I was about to set in motion. At exactly 9 a.m., when I knew Lauren would be at her desk preparing for the final coordination calls before tomorrow's event, I hit send. The email was brief and professional. Lauren, I need to discuss an urgent change to tomorrow's event. Please call me at your earliest convenience. Thank you, Roxanne Ashford. My phone rang within 10 minutes. Roxanne, Lauren's voice carried the kind of controlled concern that comes from years of managing wedding crises. I got your email. What's going on? I took a deep breath, feeling remarkably calm considering what I was about to say. I need to cancel tomorrow's event. The silence on the line stretched for several seconds. Cancel? Roxanne, the wedding is tomorrow. All the vendors are confirmed, the setup crew is scheduled to arrive at 6 a.m. I understand the timing is challenging, I said, but I'm the primary on the contract, and I'm canceling the event effective immediately. Can I ask what's happened? Is there a family emergency? Did something happen with the couple? Something happened with the couple. I almost smiled at how accurately that captured the situation, even though Lauren had no idea what she was really asking. It's a family matter, I said simply. I need the event cancelled today. I could hear Lauren typing in the background, probably pulling up my contract to verify what I was telling her. Roxanne, I have to ask, have you discussed this with the bride and groom? This is going to impact a lot of people who are planning to attend tomorrow. The decision is mine to make, I said, which was true even if it didn't answer her question. I understand there will be consequences, and I'm prepared to handle them. More typing, then Lauren's voice again, more cautious now. Okay. I'll need to start making calls to vendors immediately. The catering company, the florist, the musicians, this is going to be a significant coordination effort. I understand. Please do whatever you need to do. And Roxanne? I'm required to inform you that with less than 24 hours notice, you'll forfeit the full deposit. That's $15,000. $15,000. A few months ago, that number would have made me sick to my stomach. Now it felt like the cost of buying back my self-respect. I understand, I said. Please proceed with the cancellation. After we hung up, I sat in the cafe parking lot for a few more minutes, watching people go about their normal Friday morning routines. Someone was getting married tomorrow, just not at Thornfield Manor, and not with the vendors I'd spent months coordinating with. But I wasn't done yet. My next call was to Bella's Flowers, the premium florist whose $8,000 arrangements were supposed to transform Thornfield Manor into a garden paradise. Bella's Flowers, this is Marcus speaking. Hi Marcus, this is Roxanne Ashford. I have the order for tomorrow's wedding at Thornfield Manor. Oh yes, Ms. Ashford. We're all set for delivery first thing tomorrow morning. The arrangements are absolutely stunning, your sister is going to love them. Actually, I need to redirect that order. Redirect? The wedding venue has changed, I said, which was technically true. I'd like the flowers delivered to Millbrook General Hospital instead. The children's ward. As a donation. Marcus was quiet for a moment. That's very generous. Are you sure about this? The arrangements were specifically designed for the manor's color scheme and layout. I'm sure. Sick children deserve beautiful flowers more than anyone. Okay, let me just, yes, I can coordinate with the hospital. They'll be thrilled. Should I put a note with the donation about who it's from? Just say they're from someone who believes children should always be included in celebrations. The photographer was next. Jessica Chen had been recommended by 3 different people as the best wedding photographer in Clearwater County, and her portfolio was genuinely beautiful. Hi Jessica, this is Roxanne Ashford. We have the Rosewood Blackthorn wedding tomorrow. Roxanne. I'm so excited for tomorrow. I've been reviewing the shot list and the timeline, and everything looks perfect. There's been a change of plans. The wedding has been cancelled. Cancelled? Oh no, is everything okay? It's complicated, I said. But I have a different proposal for you. I know this is last minute, but would you be interested in doing a portrait session instead? For a single mother and her 2 children? Tomorrow? Well, yes, I suppose I could. The lighting would be beautiful in the afternoon. Perfect. And Jessica? I'd like to pay your full wedding rate for the session. Consider it a gift to a family that deserves to be celebrated. The catering company required a longer conversation, since they'd already begun food preparation for 150 guests. But when I explained that I wanted to redirect the entire order to the Millbrook Community Center's weekend meal program for families in need, the head chef actually seemed more excited than he'd been about the original wedding menu. We can adapt everything, he said enthusiastically. Turn the plated dinner into a buffet format, make the portions stretch further. We'll be able to feed probably 300 people with what you've already paid for. 300 people who would have dinner tomorrow night because of money that was supposed to buy salmon and filet mignon for people who saw my children as embarrassments. By noon, I had redirected every vendor, every service, every element of what was supposed to be Camille's dream wedding. The flowers were going to sick children. The food was going to families who needed it. The photography session was going to capture a mother and her kids being celebrated exactly as they were. The only vendor I kept was the band, and I asked them to play at the community center during the dinner service. Play happy music, I told them. Play music that makes people smile and feel celebrated. When I was finished making calls, I drove to work and had the most productive afternoon I'd had in months. There's something clarifying about making decisions that align with your values instead of constantly compromising them to keep other people happy. I picked up Emma and Jake from school at the usual time, and we went to the grocery store to pick up ingredients for their favorite dinner, homemade pizza with whatever toppings they wanted. As we walked through the store, Jake choosing pepperoni while Emma debated between mushrooms and olives, I felt lighter than I had in years. "Mom," Emma said as we stood in the checkout line, "are you happy today? You seem different." "I am happy today, sweetheart. I made some decisions that I think are going to make things better for us." "Good decisions or hard decisions?" she asked with the wisdom that 8-year-olds sometimes possess. "Both," I said. "Sometimes the best decisions are also the hardest ones." That evening, while Emma and Jake worked on homework at the kitchen table, my phone started buzzing. Text messages, missed calls, voicemails. The family group chat that had been relatively quiet all week suddenly exploded with activity. I didn't look at any of it. Not yet. I helped Jake with his math problems and listened to Emma read aloud from her library book. We made pizza together, and I let them put as much cheese as they wanted on their portions. We watched a movie on the couch, and I braided Emma's hair while Jake fell asleep against my shoulder. This was my real life. These were my real priorities. 2 children who loved me unconditionally and whom I loved more than anything in the world. A quiet house where we were safe and happy and enough exactly as we were. Around 9 o'clock, after I'd tucked both kids into their beds and read them their bedtime stories, I finally looked at my phone. 47 missed calls. 83 text messages. The voicemail notification showed more messages than I'd ever received in a single day. I poured myself a glass of wine, sat on my couch, and started reading. The panic had begun around 2 p.m., when Lauren from Thornfield Manor had apparently started making her vendor cancellation calls. By 3 p.m., vendors had begun calling Camille directly to confirm the changes. By 4 p.m., my family had realized that their dream wedding had disappeared entirely. And by 5 p.m., they had figured out that I was the only person who could have made it happen. Tomorrow was going to be very interesting. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn beauty that makes photographers weep with joy. The kind of day Camille had been dreaming about for months, the kind of day that was supposed to see her walking down the aisle at Thornfield Manor in her custom-designed dress, surrounded by $8,000 worth of flowers and 200 of her closest friends and family members. Instead, I woke up to my phone buzzing incessantly on my nightstand, the sound drilling through my peaceful morning like an alarm I couldn't turn off. The first call came at 6:47 a.m. Patricia, her voice shrill with panic. "Roxanne. You need to call me back right now. There's been some terrible mistake with the wedding vendors. They're saying everything's been cancelled. Call me." I let it go to voicemail and went downstairs to make coffee. Emma and Jake were still sleeping, and I wanted to enjoy a few minutes of quiet before the storm that I knew was coming. The second call came at 7:15 a.m. Camille, sobbing. "Roxy, please pick up. I don't understand what's happening. The florist called and said our order was donated to a hospital. The photographer said we cancelled. The venue won't return our calls. Please, I need you to fix this. I need you to call everyone and explain that this is a mistake. Fix this." Even in crisis, even when their entire wedding had vanished overnight, they still expected me to be the one who solved their problems. By 8 a.m., my phone had received calls from Patricia, Camille, Dylan, Gordon, and even Evelyn Rosewood. I listened to exactly none of them. Instead, I made breakfast for Emma and Jake, who came downstairs in their pajamas, rubbing sleep from their eyes. "Mom, your phone keeps making noise," Emma observed, climbing onto her chair at the kitchen table. "I know, sweetheart. Some people are having a difficult morning." "Are we having a difficult morning?" Jake asked, ever practical. "No, buddy. We're having a perfectly lovely morning." And we were. We ate pancakes and watched cartoons, and I braided Emma's hair while Jake built an elaborate castle with his blocks. It was peaceful and normal, and exactly what Saturday mornings should be when you're not frantically preparing for a wedding that was supposed to start in 6 hours. At 10 a.m., the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and saw Patricia standing on my front porch, still in her bathrobe, her hair uncombed, her face streaked with tears and fury. Behind her stood Gordon, looking like a man who wished he was anywhere else in the world. I considered not answering. But Emma and Jake were in the living room, and I didn't want them to be afraid of the angry woman shouting on our porch. "Stay in the living room, guys," I told them. "Mommy needs to talk to Grandma Patricia for a minute." I opened the door but didn't invite them in. "How could you do this?" Patricia's voice was raw, like she'd been screaming for hours. "How could you destroy your sister's wedding? Her whole future with Dylan is ruined because of your selfishness." Selfishness. I looked at this woman who had spent years treating me like a personal ATM, who had just last week explained why my children weren't good enough for her daughter's celebration, and felt remarkably calm. "Good morning, Patricia." "Good morning, Gordon. Don't you dare act casual with me." Patricia pushed past me into my entryway, Gordon following reluctantly behind her. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Camille is hysterical. Dylan's family thinks we're complete failures. The Rosewoods are calling us frauds and con artists." "I can imagine that's very upsetting," I said evenly. "Upsetting?" Patricia's voice cracked. "Roxanne, you've destroyed everything. Years of building relationships with the Rosewoods, Camille's entire future, our family's reputation in this town, all of it gone because you decided to throw a tantrum." A tantrum. I had redirected $47,000 of wedding expenses to feed hungry families and bring flowers to sick children, and Patricia saw it as a tantrum. "Why don't you tell me what you think happened?" I said. Gordon cleared his throat uncomfortably. "The vendors are saying you called and canceled everything. The florist, the caterer, the photographer, they all say you redirected the services to charities." "That's correct." Patricia stared at me like I'd just confessed to murder. "Why would you do something so cruel? Camille loves you. We all love you. This is the most important day of her life." "Do you?" I asked quietly. "Do you love me, Patricia?" "Of course I do. You're my daughter." "Then why weren't my children invited to the wedding?" The question hung in the air between us. Patricia's mouth opened and closed like she was trying to find words that would make sense of the contradiction. That's different. That was about the atmosphere of the event. You know how these things work at that level of society." "Whose level of society?" I asked. "Mine? The level where I work 60 hours a week to afford the life I've built for my children? Or yours? The level where you spend money you don't have to impress people who don't actually care about you?" Gordon put a hand on Patricia's arm, but she shook him off. "Those children would have been disruptive," she said, her voice getting higher. "You know Emma gets excited and Jake gets cranky when he's tired. It was better for everyone if they stayed home. Better for everyone except Emma and Jake. They're children. They'll get over it." And there it was. The truth Patricia had been dancing around for weeks. My children didn't matter. Their feelings, their excitement, their innocent joy at being included in a family celebration, none of it mattered compared to the impression Patricia wanted to make on people she barely knew. "You're right," I said. "They are children. They're my children. And I will always choose them over people who see them as inconveniences." By noon, Dylan had arrived, looking like he hadn't slept all night. He knocked on my door with the kind of desperate politeness that comes from someone who has never had to solve a real problem in his life. "Roxanne, please. I know you're angry, but surely we can work something out. My family has connections. We can find another venue, get the vendors back. It doesn't have to be today, but please don't let this destroy what Camille and I have built together." What Camille and Dylan had built together. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. "Dylan, what exactly do you think you and Camille built together?" He looked confused by the question. "Our relationship. Our future. Our wedding plans." "And who paid for those wedding plans?" His face flushed red. We always intended to reimburse you. My trust fund. Wasn't available when the deposits were due. Wasn't available when the vendor payments came due. Wasn't available for any of the $47,000 I've spent making Camille's dreams come true." $47,000? Dylan's voice was barely a whisper. "Did you think Thornfield Manor was free? Did you think the flowers and catering and photography and music just happened because your family's name opened doors?" He stood there in my doorway, and I could see him doing the math, realizing for the first time what his wedding had actually cost and who had actually paid for it. "We'll pay you back," he said finally. "Every penny. With interest." "When?" Soon. Once the trust fund." "Dylan, I've been hearing about that trust fund for 8 months. When exactly does it become available?" The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. There was no trust fund, or if there was, it wasn't accessible in any time frame that would help me recover the money I'd already spent. That afternoon, Camille arrived alone. She didn't knock, she just sat on my front porch steps in her pajamas and cried. I could see her through the window, her shoulders shaking with sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep and broken inside her. I went outside and sat beside her on the steps. "I don't understand," she said without looking at me. "I thought you loved me." "I do love you, Camille." "Then why did you destroy the most important day of my life?" I looked at my half-sister, this person I'd been financially supporting for years, this person whose dreams I'd been funding while she made decisions about my family's worthiness. "When you decided my children weren't good enough for your wedding, what did you think would happen?" She turned to look at me then, her eyes red and swollen. "That's not what happened. We just wanted everything to be perfect. Perfect without Emma and Jake. They're just kids, Roxy. They would have gotten bored and fidgety. You know how kids are at formal events." "No, Camille. I know how Emma and Jake are at family events. They're excited and happy and grateful to be included. They're good kids who deserve to celebrate their aunt's wedding. They can come to the next one," she said desperately. "Dylan and I will figure something out. We'll have another wedding, a smaller one, more casual. The kids can come to that one. The next one." She was already planning a second wedding that I would presumably fund after she'd learned to manage my contributions more effectively. "There won't be a next one," I said quietly. "Not that I'm paying for." That evening, after Emma and Jake were in bed, I sat on my couch and read through the text messages that had been accumulating all day. Panic, anger, blame, desperate attempts at negotiation, and finally, as the sun set on what should have been Camille's wedding day, the messages that revealed what my family really thought of me. "Patricia, I hope you're proud of yourself. You've destroyed this family. Camille, I'll never forgive you for this. Never. Dylan, my family thinks your whole family is crazy now. Thanks for ruining my reputation." But there was one message that was different. It came from Gordon at 8 p.m. "Roxy, I know you're not taking calls, but I wanted you to know that I understand why you did what you did. You deserved better from all of us. Take care of yourself and those beautiful kids." I read that message 3 times, and for the first time all day, I felt tears in my eyes. Not tears of regret, but tears of relief that at least one person in my family understood that love shouldn't cost $47,000 and the exclusion of your children. Outside my window, the sun was setting on October 15th, the day that was supposed to have been the wedding of the century. Instead, It had been the day I chose my children over people who saw them as embarrassments, the day I chose my financial security over other people's dreams, the day I chose my self-respect over family expectations. It had been a very good day. 3 weeks passed before the silence from my family felt less like an angry standoff and more like a permanent change in the landscape of my life. During those weeks, Emma and Jake and I settled into a new rhythm that felt remarkably peaceful. Without the constant undercurrent of family drama and financial demands, our small townhouse felt bigger somehow, more genuinely ours. I expected to feel guilty. I'd been raised to believe that family loyalty meant sacrifice, that love was measured in how much you were willing to give up for other people's happiness. But as October turned into November and the leaves outside our kitchen window shifted from gold to brown, I found myself feeling something I hadn't experienced in years: financial security. For the first time since I'd started working, my paychecks were going into my own accounts instead of being immediately redistributed to solve other people's problems. Emma's asthma medication didn't require me to choose between her health and my grocery budget. Jake's art supplies weren't a luxury I had to carefully consider. We weren't wealthy, but we were stable in a way that felt revolutionary after years of living paycheck to paycheck while supporting a family that earned more than they spent. The kids adapted to the change with the resilience that children possess when they're secure in their parents' love. Emma stopped asking about Aunt Camille's wedding after the first week, and Jake seemed to have forgotten entirely that they'd ever been planning to attend. They were happy, well-adjusted, and blissfully unaware that their college funds were slowly beginning to grow again instead of being systematically depleted. But the real revelation came when I started calculating what our life could look like without the constant financial drain of my family's emergencies. Emma wanted to take piano lessons, something I'd been putting off for 2 years because there was always some crisis that needed my money more urgently. Jake had been asking about joining the Little League team, but the equipment and fees had seemed like an unnecessary expense when Patricia needed help with her mortgage payment. Now, suddenly, my children's interests and activities were possible. Not just possible, but obvious priorities that should never have been delayed for other people's poor financial planning. The first real test of my resolve came on a Tuesday evening in mid-November. I was helping Emma with her homework when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Roxy? It's me." Camille's voice was small, tentative, nothing like the confident woman who'd been planning her dream wedding just a month earlier. "Hello, Camille. I wanted to call and see how you were doing. How the kids are doing." "We're doing very well, thank you." There was a long pause, and I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, gathering courage for whatever she was really calling to say. "Roxy, I've been thinking a lot about what happened. About what you said. About Emma and Jake. Okay. I think maybe I didn't handle things well. The wedding planning, I mean. I got caught up in what Dylan's family expected, and I lost sight of what really mattered." I waited for her to continue, not making this easier for her by filling the silence. "The thing is," she said, her voice getting smaller, "Dylan and I are still planning to get married. Just something smaller. More intimate. And I wanted to. I hoped that maybe you and the kids would come. If you wanted to." There it was. The attempt to restore the relationship without acknowledging the real damage that had been done, without addressing the financial exploitation that had defined our dynamic for years. "That's very kind of you to think of us," I said carefully. "When are you planning this smaller wedding? Maybe next spring?" "We're still figuring out the details. And Roxy, I know things got complicated with the money situation before, but this time we're handling everything ourselves. You wouldn't need to contribute anything." Contribute. As if $47,000 had been a voluntary contribution rather than a systematic exploitation of my financial stability and family loyalty. "I appreciate you letting me know," I said. "I'll need to think about whether that's something we're interested in." "Of course. I understand. And Roxy? I really am sorry about how everything happened. I know you put a lot into the first wedding, and I'm sorry it didn't work out." Sorry it didn't work out. As if my decision to cancel had been an unfortunate accident rather than a deliberate choice to protect myself and my children from people who saw us as problems to be managed. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, thinking about forgiveness and boundaries and what it means to love someone who has hurt you. I did love Camille, despite everything. But I'd learned that love without respect is just another form of manipulation, and respect meant acknowledging the full scope of what had happened between us. A few days later, Gordon called. Unlike Camille's tentative approach, his call was direct and honest. Roxy, I wanted to apologize to you properly. Not just for the wedding situation, but for years of standing by while Patricia treated you like a personal bank account. Thank you for saying that, Gordon. I should have spoken up sooner. I should have protected you from some of the financial pressure Patricia put on you. I failed you as a stepfather, and I'm sorry. His apology felt genuine in a way that Camille's had not, probably because he wasn't asking for anything in return. Patricia and I are going to counseling, he continued. She's having a hard time understanding why you did what you did, but I think she's starting to see that our family dynamics haven't been fair to you. I'm glad you're working on things together. We are. And Roxy? I want you to know that if you ever need anything, really need anything, not just want something, I'm here for you. As family should be. That conversation felt like closure in a way that surprised me. Not reconciliation, necessarily, but acknowledgement of the truth and a foundation for whatever relationship we might build going forward. The holidays came and went with a simplicity that felt luxurious after years of complicated family gatherings. Emma and Jake and I spent Thanksgiving volunteering at the community center where the wedding catering had been redirected, serving meals to families who reminded me why generosity should flow toward need rather than toward maintaining appearances. At Christmas, we stayed home and opened presents by our own tree, in our own pajamas, without the stress of managing other people's expectations or the financial strain of expensive gifts for people who never seemed to appreciate them. Emma got her piano lessons, and Jake got his Little League equipment. We were a family of 3, complete and happy and enough exactly as we were. In January, I received an unexpected piece of mail that changed my perspective on everything that had happened. It was a thank you card from the children's ward at Millbrook General Hospital, with drawings from kids who had received the wedding flowers I'd redirected. One drawing showed a little girl in a hospital bed, surrounded by enormous colorful flowers, with "Thank you" written in shaky crayon letters across the top. That card is framed on my desk at work now, a reminder that sometimes the most painful decisions lead to the most beautiful outcomes. Spring arrived with its usual promise of new beginnings, and with it came another call from Camille. She and Dylan had indeed planned a smaller wedding, a backyard ceremony at Dylan's parents' house with immediate family only. She invited us again, and this time I said yes. Not because I'd forgotten what had happened, but because I'd learned the difference between forgiveness and enabling. I could forgive my sister for the ways she'd hurt me while still maintaining boundaries that protected my children and myself from being hurt again. Emma and Jake were flower girl and ring bearer at that small ceremony, roles they performed with the joy and excitement they'd always deserved. They were celebrated and included and loved exactly as they were, which was all I'd ever wanted for them. But the most important change wasn't in my family relationships. It was in my relationship with myself. I'd learned that my worth wasn't determined by my usefulness to other people. I'd discovered that saying no to requests that hurt my family was actually an act of love, not selfishness. I'd realized that my children's security and happiness were more important than maintaining peace with people who didn't value us. If there's one thing this whole experience taught me, it's that you can't buy your way into being valued by people who see you as a resource rather than a person. Love that comes with conditions and price tags isn't love at all, it's just a transaction wrapped in family obligations. So if you've ever found yourself funding other people's dreams while being excluded from the celebration, take it from me, choose yourself. Choose your children. Choose the life that honors your worth rather than exploiting it. You'll sleep better. You'll breathe easier. And you'll discover that peace doesn't come from keeping everyone else happy, it comes from finally protecting what matters most. And if this story resonated with you, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what boundaries you're ready to set in your own life. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about finding your strength when others try to diminish it, because your worth is not negotiable, and your love should never come at the cost of your dignity. Trust me, you're worth more than the price they're asking you to pay. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.